the risk assessment. Now, before we discuss anything from NEBOSH side, what is risk? What is the meaning of risk? As per your understanding, how would you define risk?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
The risk, you know, for each, for example, let's say like a leave activity. Okay, there is we need to make a risk assessment. Okay, what is the hazard? Okay, therefore, what is the potential hazard when we start any step by step from the procedure? You know, there is a potential hazard. Okay, and what precaution there, and what. So all of this preparation, what right tool, what right PPE is there. So this, we need to make this assessment. Okay, with the group. So this from my side.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I'm talking about what is any other opinion, please. What is risk? The risk assessment, of course, is a systematic process, you know, that we'll discuss later on. What is risk actually? The definition of risk as per your understanding.
It could be danger.
Okay.
Either danger to human life or products or I don't know. It's danger. That's in my opinion.
No problem. That's why, you know, before we discuss NEBOSH theory, it's much better to have our own experience to be shared. And of course, some way or another, everyone is on the right track. You are telling the right things. But I'm just going to differentiate what is the difference between hazard and risk. What is the difference between hazard and risk? Or both are similar?
I think risk, you know, that's any unexpected hazard, you know, that can potentially coming, you know, or without any plan or anything that's unexpected hazard coming.
So hazard is anything which is harmful for the people, harmful for the assets of the company, harmful to the environment, harmful even to the business itself. Like maybe one electrical hazard, short circuit, and the fire incident, and the whole company burned out, God forbid. But risk is kind of chances, the probability. What is the chance of that short circuit? What is the chance? So probability or chance, you know, to that danger or to that loss, in other words, or that harm actually is called risk. So risk associated with every hazard. That is why we need risk assessment to evaluate what is the probability, what is the severity, you know, of that risk. That is why we have a certain formula which we are going to discuss. So risk assessment of any activity, of any process or department, or overall risk assessment of our business processes becoming more and more important. Then we can know, you know, either our existing controls are sufficient, or we need to put additional controls and bring that risk level to at negligible level or as low as, on the other side, to make sure it is tolerable actually. That means as low as reasonably practicable, or bringing it at negligible level. That is why we need a detailed risk assessment, and we can't bring that risk down. We can't eliminate for sure, because if we want to eliminate risk, then eliminate the hazard. Hazard can be eliminated, but risk can't be eliminated 100%. Even you find a substitute of that hazard, still risk will be associated. But what is the chances? What is the probability? What are the consequences of that risk need to be measured? That is called risk assessment. Now, what is risk? Something, what is hazard? Something with the potential to cause harm, like could be physical, chemical, biological, ergonomic, or physiological. And what is risk? The chances, the likelihood of harm occurring in combination with the severity of the foreseeable harm. So hazard can be physical hazard, the chemical hazard, the biological, ergonomic, or physiological or psychological. And also the risk, the likelihood of harm occurring in combination with the severity of the foreseeable harm. So these are the differences between hazard and risk. Now, what is risk profiling? It is kind of a process of identifying and assessing the range of risks that threatens an organization along with recognition of their likelihood and probable impacts, the current risk management controls in place, and the identification and prioritization of further control measures. And risk profiling is one of the most important activity, where sometime we all experts don't agree. Somebody gonna say, oh, the likelihood will be 3, the likelihood would be 5. Someone will say, no, 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 this likelihood is only 1. Severity is 3 or severity is 5. So a lot of debate will be going on just for that topic, the risk profiling, which risk is more terrible and how the consequences could be horrible. So that debate, that is why we need a team of experts, team of risk assessors, who can give different perceptions, and then we bring on the table and see what majority is saying, and it is logically, technically sound enough, or we still have to get another opinion. That is why sometimes the companies are hiring us as a risk assessor. They don't want to get any other service. They'll call, okay, Shtiyaq, just come and have a risk assessment of our all processes or business processes. We just want to see either our existing controls are good enough, or we still need some additional controls. But that controls, please, you do the risk assessment and let us understand where we are standing. Just for one document, the risk assessment they call us. And that why the reason is the existing employees and team of experts, they are used to the same environment. That is why you need the third eye, even as a risk assessor sometime. And it would be a lot of beneficial activity, but make sure that person is having some sort of expertise relevant to your business processes or scope. Sometimes you hire a risk assessor, but he is misfit as per your business operations. Never ever he done any project into that similar company. So how come he can have a better risk assessment? Let me give you an example. If a chemical company is there and you are sending electrical engineer to complete a risk assessment, what would be the results? Now, if you are sending a chemical engineer to an electrical company and telling him to conduct a risk assessment, how the result could be more effective? So I hope you got the point. So risk profiling is one of the most important activity where we require a team of experts sitting together and finalizing the likelihood, the level of severity, multiplying them, getting the risk factor, and accordingly putting some actions, either in the red zone or yellow or in a green combination or with numbers we are going to discuss. Now, what is risk assessment? As I mentioned earlier, it's a formal process of identifying what preventive and protective measures by evaluating the risk arising from a hazard. So every hazard have some associated risk actually, taking into account and adequacy of any existing controls and deciding whether or not the risk is acceptable. Within the existing controls, whether this risk is acceptable, tolerable, or not acceptable. If it is not acceptable, make sure you put and apply further additional controls to bring that risk at acceptable level. Now, risk profiling, each organization will have its own risk profile. A risk profile examines what? The nature and the level of threat faced by the organization, the likelihood of those adverse effects occurring. No, somebody gonna say very likely. Someone say no, just likely. Somebody gonna say not likely. So that means the number 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. So accordingly, you are profiling your risk. And someone gonna say no, the severity is 3. That means the fatal consequence will be there because of that risk if something goes wrong. Let's take an example. You are driving a car. Now, driving itself is a process, the hazard itself is there. Now, if an element involved in the speed, if the speed factor is involved, what would be the probability of accident at the speed of 180 kilometer per hour? And what would be the severity or the consequence of that accident at the speed of 180? Now, if we want to reduce the likelihood, consequence could be similar. Like if you reduce speed below 120 kilometer per hour, now what would be the likelihood of accident and the consequence of that accident? Now you reduce more speed, just one factor I'm discussing, and you drive your car at the speed of 80 kilometer per hour. What would be the probability of accident, God forbid, and the consequence either would be fatal or non-fatal or just kind of an incident? What would be the level of consequence? I hope you got the point. So the risk profiling is based on several factors. That is why a team of experts should be there. It should not be done individually, my friends. It should never be done individually. Even you are highly expert, still I would recommend don't do it individually. Get involved to the relevant guys and make sure they are fully expert for that particular area, and accordingly you complete it. The effectiveness of controls in place to manage those risks, of course, we really have to achieve and ensure the effectiveness of controls. The risk factor, the likelihood and the probability or kind of consequence will go up if the controls are not effective. If effectiveness of your existing controls are not there, the probability will go up, and consequences, of course, would be horrible, as per the nature of the activity or process. So effectiveness is everything. Whatever existing controls we implemented, accordingly we need to measure either the controls are effective, so we can claim this risk as negligible, or tolerable, or as low as reasonably practicable. It is good enough. What we are committing, the existing controls are okay. If they are not okay, more chances of accident, so we need additional controls to reduce the probability. And of course, accordingly, consequence could also be affected. So it's a game of effective controls. And whenever the word control is there, you have to bear in mind the hierarchy of control, like starting from elimination, then substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and the last one is the PPs. Whenever the word control is there against risk or hazards. Now, what is risk profiling? The outcome of risk profiling will be that the right risks have been identified and prioritized for action. The right control measures have been identified and implemented, and minor risks have been given a disproportionate priority. So you decide the red zone areas, the yellow zone areas, or the green zone areas. The risk negligible, putting in the green zone because existing controls are good enough. And some you are putting in the yellow because probability is low, the consequence is low. So you consider you can put into an action plan. Maybe you will take action within 1 week. But if you find some activities and probability is high or likelihood is high, consequence is terrible, like 5 multiply 5 is equal to 25, and you are putting that risk under red zone, that means the existing controls are not sufficient, and the whole project or the process activity could be endangered and creating a lot of terrible accidents. So then you stop. Sometimes you stop the project. If you are stopping any activity or any project or process because of risk profiling, make sure it is authentic, technically and logically good enough to prove that you have a solid reason to stop that project, solid reason to stop that activity, because you don't want to let anyone to be killed or injured, because you are knowledgeable, what exactly you're talking about, but convincing to your management, make sure you are quite skilled in risk profiling and your understanding is excellent. It's not like the issue should be in green zone and you are putting in yellow, or issue should be in yellow and you are putting in red zone. Then a lot of debates and resistance you will face, during your job actually. So never forget the word risk profiling. It's a very excellent skill, I'm telling you. Now, the risk profiling process, what we have to do, identify the risk that threatens the organization, identify the health and safety impacts, how that risk could be impacted, and the business impacts associated with each threat. Identify how well each threat is controlled and identify the likelihood of each threat happening and prioritize the threats. So major portion is identify the likelihood, and accordingly you will get some analysis whether this risk is acceptable or not acceptable. So prioritize the threat accordingly. Now, what is the purpose of risk assessment? Ultimately, to prevent death and personal injury and other types of loss incident like breaches of statutory law or even the cost of loss. So I hope you remember I gave you one example of Bin Laden, one Makkah incident, and still they are facing terrible consequences. So the ultimate purpose of the risk assessment is to prevent our company operations from any fatal accidents, to keep safe our employees, to secure our goodwill in the market, to keep our customers with us with happy mood that we have zero injuries, zero accidents, zero harm to the environment, and zero damage to the company properties even. That is the purpose actually. So we can save or we can avoid any cost of loss actually. Now, a suitable and sufficient assessment identifies significant risk, enable employer to identify and prioritize control measures appropriate to the nature of work, proportionate to the risk, and validate for a reasonable time. It's not like you completed a risk assessment and you placed existing controls and you suggested some additional controls as per the rating, as per the analysis, like you got some numbers in red zone and you thought immediately you need to implement several controls, but it's not done. And then you have several action plan for yellow zone area and again no actions. So then make sure, if you have suitable and sufficient assessment, make sure proper each action is validated with a reasonable time frame. So make it time bound and make sure who is responsible to take that action. Now we have a group exercise like sources can be internal or external to the organization. List all the internal and external sources you can think of and discuss them. What could be the internal and external sources you can think of and discuss them to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment? Because gathering the information is the first step, the number one step of risk assessment. So what are the internal and external sources to the organization to think of and discuss them, and find out the right set of informations to complete the risk assessment. I repeat again, gathering the information is number one step in the risk assessment process. My question is, what are the internal and external sources are there? Over to you, please. Whatever is coming in your mind, just speak up. It's just sharing of experience to each other. It's not like either you are correct or incorrect. No. Just we are learning from each other, inshallah. Before we discuss anything from NEBOSH side. Like if you are a risk assessor, what internal sources you will use and get that data and see and study and understand for better risk assessment? And what about external? Yes, please.
Yes, for the internal, in my opinion, I believe it's more related to the procedures completed by the company and put together. Regarding the external, there are some agencies, especially with the environment and stuff, they have their own rules, and based on that, the company will have to follow. So this can be an external for the environmental regulations, and for the internal, as I mentioned, the internal practices, maybe the procedures, maybe some of the internal rules set by the company. It cannot be tolerated. It cannot be changed. So those sorts, when we form the risk assessment, we have to look into, is it acceptable by our company or not? If it's not, we'll have to see the external. Is it allowed to be done by the government, by
Excellent,
the environmental agency or not?
excellent, Marshall. Excellent. So a lot of internal sources are there, like we can check the accidents history, we can check first aid history, we can check several records internally, like accident records, ill health data, absent reports, medical records, risk assessment, the existing one, maintenance reports, safety inspections, audit and investigation reports, safety committee meetings, and external, as you mentioned, Mashallah, the national legislation, approved codes of practice, standards like BSEI, ISO, manufacturing information, trade associations, safety publications, international bodies, or even trade union and charities, So we can collect several informations internally and externally. So the more informations or more knowledge we have about our company and company operations, more better risk assessment we can conduct, inshallah. But bear in mind, these are the 5 steps to risk assessment. The number 1, make sure you identify the hazards. Make sure you identify the people who might be harmed and how. The third step, evaluate the risk and decide on precautions. Step 4, record the significant finding. And step 5 is review and update as necessary. But number 1, you have to get maximum information about that company. That is the single most, even before you decide and go for risk assessment. And other than that, 5 steps logically in sequence we have to use, like identify the hazards, identify the people who might be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, decide on precautions, record the significant findings, and implement and review and update as necessary. So these are in sequence, all 5 steps. And when we're going to complete IG2 risk assessment project as per NEBOSH format, these are the 5 steps in that format which we need to complete. Even though few additional things are there, they've made that risk assessment format with 4 portions. We will discuss, inshallah, the moment we'll start exam preparation training, inshallah, maybe on the last day of the training. So for each step, we will discuss after the break how each step, like identify the hazard, how we have to identify what kind of hazards can be there, what kind of health hazards going to be there. So we'll discuss after the break, inshallah. Okay, so enjoy your prayer and lunch break, and I'll catch you back at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, warmly welcome back after a lunch and prayer break. So we were right in the middle of the discussion. What are the 5 steps to complete our risk assessment? And I hope we'll be applying all these 5 steps in our IG2 risk assessment project also. Like number 1 step is identify the hazards. And number 2 step is all about identify the people who might be harmed and how. That means the affected employees of that area. Or evaluate the risk and decide on precautions. We have to measure the level, the magnitude of the risk, and accordingly, we'll put some control or kind of precautions. And of course, it's a game of recording. We have to record these significant findings and implement, and most importantly, review and update as necessary. So these are 5 steps, but in detail, we surely have to understand them. And as I mentioned before the break, that this is the most important training slides, because surely we have to make sure our deep understanding about all 5 steps of risk assessment. Now, the step 1 is identify the hazards, and the hazards can be safety hazards or can be health hazards. Now, if we talk about safety hazards, so we can consider, anything which is or which have adverse impact on our safety, we can consider as kind of a safety hazard. And anything which is harmful, of course, and can have adverse effect on our health is called health hazards. So two domains. How many hazards are there which directly can damage our health, or of course, putting some pressures on our safety. That's all safety hazards and health hazards. So there are several examples, like NEBOSH have mentioned, capable of causing physical injury is called safety hazard, and capable of causing occupational disease or ill health is called health hazard. Like COVID-19, let's take an example of health hazard. First of all, this coronavirus is directly damaging to our health. Either we have lower immunity system, especially those people with lower immunity system, they are more in danger zone. But the point is, it directly affect on our health, our lungs and our breathing system, and creating terrible consequences. So in that context, we can say, oh, it's biological hazard comes under health hazards category. Same way, if we take examples of safety hazards like working at height, either you are using ladder or man lift or scaffolding or any higher working platform you are using, or WP, we call it mobile elevating work platforms, all comes under working at height. So anything happens during working at height process is called safety hazard. Falling objects while working at height, any equipment can fall down, the people, our employees can fall down, God forbid. So falling objects is another hazard or kind of example of safety hazard. Then moving vehicles, machinery, electricity, chemicals, and the chemicals could be in solid shape, liquid, or even in shape of gas. The chemicals. Low oxygen concentration or deep water, fire explosion, animal, and other few examples are there. So health could be
What
physical.
what about the tripping hazard? This could be
Sorry?
also safety. What about the tripping hazard?
Yeah, slip, trips, and fall, that also comes under safety hazard. Any hazard which is directly having adverse effect on our safety is a safety hazard. And any hazard which directly affecting to our health, actually, that is coming under health hazards, like radiation as a hazard directly affecting to our health. First of all, chemicals, like chemicals we have here in safety, and chemical also we have in health. So both way we need to understand. If a chemical is spilled, so several effects are there, like slip, slips, and fall could happen. On the other side, fumes are coming and somebody's inhaling and affecting their lungs. That also comes under health hazard. So we truly need to understand, these two domains, and we truly need to understand how to differentiate between safety hazards and health hazards. And this is the best way for our easy understanding to be a best hazard recognizer, or and that is the single most important skill as a safety leader. We have to be brilliant, actually, and even I would say excellent as a deep observer or kind of hazard identifier or risk assessor, in other words. So health hazards is all about physical, chemicals, biological, ergonomic, and psychological. This is number one step. We have to identify the hazards. And once hazards are identified, the next step is even little bit more detail about step number one, like hazard identification. No doubt there are several methods. One is the task analysis. We need to analyze the job components before the job starts, chop up the elephant, understand all sub processes. Either it's a master process and Under that process, you chop up and make sure how many sub processes or activities are there. You are just trying to understand that task, and then you see the legislation relevant to that process or activity. Could be like standards or guiding documents. Manufacturer is also helping us and can give operating handbooks, chemical safety data sheets, and incident data like accident or near miss or air health would also help us for identifying the hazards. These are the methods. And particularly for task, we have to remember this random, the process like select the task, record the stages of the task, like write down each step, the sub step of that task, and of course, evaluate risk associated with each stage, develop the safe working method, implement safe working method, and monitor to ensure effectiveness. Let's take an example of Sadara projects. Like your one contractor is coming at your site for maybe a welding project, or maybe for excavation, maybe for grinding, cutting, or any fabrication project. Now, how Sadara's safety system will be teaching them, guiding them all the steps before even they start the project. So every process in the world have 3 stages: before, during, and after. Before starting that task particular, what safety regulations Sadara implemented for their contractors, either they have to get work permit, and the work permit will not be issued until they have joint set inspection or kind of GHA, job hazard analysis, or maybe GSA, job safety analysis, or maybe HIP, hazard identification plan, and ERP, emergency response plan of that particular process. Maybe the gas testing results also. Maybe the complete, if the isolation also will be done by the contractor, maybe certain different permits and their requirements need to be fulfilled. Then you're gonna be evaluating as a customer before even you sign that permit. But once that permit is signed, so both parties legally signed an agreement, by the way, that you, this is a type of agreement that you have identified all the hazards and you have implemented the required kind of controls. And most importantly, you truly understand what kind of PP is required, what kind of tools and equipments are allowed to take inside, and who will be the standby man. If it is a hot work, who will be the fire watcher. You before even you allow them to work, you are agreeing a lot of terms and making sure proactively that the prevention system is well implemented, and the chances of accidents or injuries are reduced actually through your Sadara's safety management system, and we call it PTW also, the permit to work system. You just implemented that one procedure along with isolation and lockout tagout, even hazard identification procedure you applied. If you believe toolbox meetings are, of course, before starting the project you required. So toolbox, plenty of instructions you issued from Sadara side, that should also be followed by the contractor. Then of course the equipment, and if they require third-party inspection, you have fully right to verify the equipment, whatever bringing by the contractor are fully certified from the third party. And you're gonna also verify the right person for the right job. So as a Sadara, as a customer, you have right to verify the valid IDs and not the expired one. Either the crane operators are there, the riggers, or any electrical engineers, or whosoever is coming, including the safety officer of that contractor. Surely you will double check and verify he's the right person for the right job, that only the competent people you are accepting for that project. Why you are performing all these systematic way of safe working methods? Because only for that task, you don't want to see any injuries, you don't want to see any accidents, no harm to your properties, no damage to the environment. So that task have to be performed in a way your procedures are guiding, and your procedures definitely are developed by benchmarking several international standards, maybe from ISO, maybe from OSHA regulations, maybe your customer defined standards. If you have project with the Royal Commission, they have particular standards. You have project with Saudi Electricity, they have 5-star safety programs. You work with Saudi Aramco, they have GIs, a lot of standards for each process and material and kind of nature of your projects. So they will guide their system will guide, and we as a contractor have to abide by it, have to follow their system just before even we perform that task, So before, during, and after. So during performing that task, surely, we have to make sure the task is being performed in a way it should be actually. And that is like if welding process is there. So welding SOP is well being followed. If excavation process is there, the excavation process of kind of SOP is all steps are being followed as per the standardized SOP, whatever is mentioned, So just to complete one task, how many things are kind of safe working system methods we try to implement. But anyhow, as per NEBOSH theories, what they do is the task analysis must be done. Select the task, record the stages of the task, like let's take a task as excavation. What steps you're going to do, the stages of that task. Are you going to have some kind of work permit to be issued for this particular activity? Yes or no? It is done? Yes. Now the next stage, do you need some kind of pre-excavation checklist to be fulfilled? Yes or no? If it is yes, it's okay, we can move on. Do we require a toolbox meeting? Is it done? Yes, it's done. So you create check and box for each step, and even selection of your excavator, the selection of your operator. You double check and you verify and make sure this task is going to be performed in a way it should be. And then underground cables or kind of pipelines, you are using electrical metal detectors or kind of metal detectors, or even somewhat the cable detectors actually, just to double check if there is any underground hazard and how the precautions have to be done. If hand digging is involved, again for that particular step, what safety precautions you are going to apply actually. So you are chopping up this elephant. Elephant means the big process. Excavation is a big process. So before you perform it, what step you are going to following up, and who will be responsible to identify what type of soil level is there. Is it soil type A, soil type B, soil type C? What engineering methods we need to implement? How we need to apply, sloping, benching, shielding, or kind of four methods are there. We have sloping, benching, shielding, and one more method is that I don't remember exactly, but that four methods you need to decide which one is going to be suitable for you according to the type of soil. And if you are using a sloping angle, let's take an example. And if it is soil type A, what should be the angle for sloping, like 56 degree or below that. If it is soil type B, what would be the sloping angle, like 45 degree? If it is soil type C, which is least stable, the weaker one we have at the top, mostly in shape of sand, in other words, for that soil, what would be the sloping angle? Like 34 degree sloping angle we required for soil type C. Same way, if it is rock, like stable rock, then 90 degree would also be working. So sloping, benching, shielding, all such methods we apply, to make sure our people are safe and there is no chance of, or very less chance of cave-in, because several risks are associated with those activities, So accordingly, we need to evaluate the risk of each stage, associated with each stage, and develop the safe working method. For each activity, for each stage, we have to develop what is the best, safest working method. And accordingly, we'll implement safe working method and monitor. Ultimately, even after implementation and following all the methods, still we required a strong supervision or kind of monitoring to ensure effectiveness. So, these are hazard identification methods, and the number one is task analysis. Step 2, we are going to discuss identify the people at risk. Step 1 was identify the hazards, and step 2 is identify the people at risk, like could be your workers, operators, maintenance staff, cleaners, contractors, visitors, or maybe members of the public or even trespassers. Now, identify the people at risk. You have to be careful for the vulnerable groups or individuals. Could be young people. Don't expect, they will be thinking like you, the experienced professionals. They are just young, teenagers, in other words. Even they're not allowed, like below 18 years, better not to hire anyone, but somewhat it is allowed above 15 years also, but make sure they are coming under young category. So you are not going to giving them very much difficult technical activities and putting them under pressure or under risk, New or expectant mothers and also disabled workers, lone workers. The third step is evaluating the risk and deciding on precautions. So what is the formula of risk? Risk is equal to likelihood multiply the severity. Likelihood means the chances, the probability. What is the probability or likelihood of that particular against that hazard or against that risk, and is equal to multiply the severity, the consequence, and likelihood could be numbered 1 to 5. If it is you are mentioning and deciding 1, that means extremely unlikely, and then if it is 2, like unlikely, and 3 is possible, that means starting from 3 the dangers are started, even 2 at some level. 3 is equal to possible, 4 likely, and 5 is very probably. So more chances, that means the number 5 is there. Like driving a car above than 100 or 120 kilometer or 180 kilometer, that means the probability of accident, we can give the number 5 even, that there is high or very probability that accident could happen. Same way the severity, the consequence, that could also be, because the person hitting with, God forbid, with 180 kilometer above, the consequence could be fatal, could be terrible, right? So we can give number 5, that means disabling injury, or maybe at some level death category also. So 5 multiply 5 as per the formula. Risk is equal to likelihood multiply severity. So 5 multiply 5 is coming 25. Now our criteria is 20 to 25. If we get that number, the area is red zone. So we need immediate actions to minimize, to reduce that risk level, to bring it at acceptable level, tolerable, or as low as reasonably practicable. A lot would apply here. So I repeat again, the formula of risk is equal to likelihood multiply severity, and there are numbers. It can be 1 to 3, it can be 1 to 5. Every company, you can check your Sadara risk registers matrix or kind of formulas you applied, and then see how you decide that activity, that risk is unacceptable, and immediately you are stopping and taking some corrective preventive actions. And same way, if you are giving deciding likelihood with 2 and severity with 2, if it is coming 4, so what your criteria is saying, so you can study your risk assessment procedure of Sadara, the risk assessment register of Sadara, and those registers could be maybe more than 50 different registers, maybe one risk assessment only for fire safety management system, one register for chemicals, one register for machines and equipment. So, or maybe one master risk assessment register, that you need to go back and see how Sadara is, and I'm sure might be already quite familiar, mashallah. Now, anyway, the evaluation process is quite easy to understand, because risk is equal to likelihood multiply severity. So severity going up, likelihood going towards horizontal, like going up to 5. So you will get numbers accordingly. And the color combination is observing, like if the number is coming from 20 to 25, likelihood is 5, severity is 5 for that particular risk. So 20 to 25, your criteria is saying you need to decide, you need to put immediate kind of actions or putting some following some precautions also. So same way, easily that graph will highlight what is the level of that risk, how serious it is. Is it acceptable or unacceptable? So according to this chart, or according to your register, whatever is mentioned, you can evaluate either your existing controls, like if the number is 20 to 25, it's a straightforward indicator your existing controls are not sufficient. I repeat again, If any risk you evaluated and you found the number 20 to 25 in between, then that is an indicator your existing controls are not sufficient for that particular activity. So what you have to do? Of course, you will put some precautions or using the hierarchy of control. And hierarchy of control, I hope everyone remembers now. It all starts from elimination, then substitution, then you start applying engineering controls, then administrative controls, and the last one, the PPs. Now let's talk about the hierarchy of control. Elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPs. And PPs comes last, by the way. The first thing is you need to apply all above methods and then you go for the PPs. Now, few of the further details of hierarchy of control: elimination or substitution. Substitution means like you are using solvent-based paint, since there are mostly you are dealing with chemicals. So imagine if a chemical is extremely flammable, extremely toxic, and terribly dangerous for human health. And then you start researching, you have a research and development department, and that team found another substitution. So what you are doing? You are eliminating the solvent base and substituting with a water-based paint, which is less flammable, less toxic, and having very minor health issues, So you find the substitution. Otherwise, engineering control. And under engineering, few further steps: isolation, total enclosure or separation, segregation, partial enclosure or safety devices. Then, of course, you try administrative controls, your safe system of work, your policy, your procedure, your SOPs for that particular process, and reduce exposure. You put some rules. This is a highly noisy area. Nobody can stay there for more than 2 hours or 1 hour. And nobody is going to work regularly into that noisy area. And you also create some reduction in exposure time, rather than allowing anyone to work for 8 hours continuously in a highly noisy area. You try to minimize and put some administrative rules for that area. And same way, you put warning signs, you gave information, instruction, training, and supervision, and that's all comes under administrative controls. And ultimately, the last one is the PPs, personal protective equipment. And personal protective equipment should be suitable, appropriate. Selection is very much important according to the nature of your activity or process, or the area you are working in. Accordingly, you need to decide what are the suitable PPs, and make sure employer, the business owner, he is responsible to provide PPs, not getting any sort of money or putting cost on employees' pocket. This is purely employee's responsibility to provide suitable and appropriate right set of PPs. Safety sign, this is kind of an example like prohibition. It all comes under graphic communication. I hope you remember 3 types of communications, like verbal, written, and graphic communication. So this is just an example of graphic communication: safety signs, prohibition, warning, mandatory, safe condition, or fire equipment. So accordingly, within Sadara, I'm sure you have implemented plenty of safety signs. Just make sure people understand, your employees truly understand what those safety signs are all about. Sometimes still confusions could be there, So the last one is the personal protective equipment, the PPs. Personal protective equipment regulations 1992 as amended. What that regulations are saying: supply suitable PPs appropriate for risk, ergonomic fits. That means fit testing is important. Doesn't increase overall risk. Sometimes we encourage, make sure you have PPs free area, kind of a green zone area. Don't kill your employees sometimes wearing 8 kg PPs everywhere all the time and anywhere within your organizational territory. So some of the areas you can allow them, guys, this area you don't need to wear any PPE. This is a green zone area, and it's not mandatory that everywhere you have to wear PPEs. So, but sometime I noted as a safety auditor, whenever I ask, do you have some PPEs free area? No, 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 that's not allowed. We can't allow them to be there in any area without PPEs. Then it's a systematic gap. You truly need to work on your shop floor layout and see what are the areas not at all required PPEs. And your risk assessment would also be helping you to decide those green zone areas. Now, complies with standards, make sure all PPEs are complying with standards, ensure compatibility of items, and also suitable storage. And most importantly, you have to provide information, instruction, and training actually. That is critically important. Sometimes we have PPEs, but they don't know how to wear. Sometimes we provide PPEs, but our employees, they are not trained how to wear. Let's take an example. You provided SCUBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, but they don't know how to wear it. You provided full body harness even, but no idea how to wear it. So make sure whatever PPEs you are providing, even NIOSH approved air purification respirators or any special PPE you are providing, make sure they are familiar, especially how to use them. And employees either willingly should be capable as a kind of a better safety culture to use PPEs. If they are not using, then enforced to use, because we are implementing those PPEs for their safety. And there is another misconception in the employees' mindset. I noted personally on ground. They believe the PPEs, the safety rules, the housekeeping, always being putting more stress from the safety department or even from the management side whenever there is an audit. So their mindset we are developing that PPEs or say following safety rules and ensuring housekeeping is all about to dealing with audits. Maybe that audit is coming from third party, maybe from second party audit from your customer side, and maybe you are going for internal audits. So that misconception, I'm not talking about Sadara, but look into your contractors employees mindset. Either they are following safety or PPs just to keep you happy, or for their safety they are realizing, because we are investing millions of real for buying those PPs. And what employees understand, this is only for the sake of audits to show off. So our customers can see, look, everything is okay. The full safety system is implemented, but they have no idea it is implemented only for one day, for the audit day. And very next day, same culture is there. I'm sharing practical examples, like visiting more than 3,000 companies throughout my career. So I have plenty of organizational culture observations, how people behave. This is terrible misconception. If your employees are thinking PPs are provided by the company just for the sake of audits, Now replace or repair damaged or lost items. Now we have a group exercise, discuss the benefits and limitations of PPs as a risk control method. What are your take on it, please? Over to you. Any voluntarily want to share some insights? What are the benefits and limitations of PPs as a risk control method? The benefits and limitations of PPs. Yes, please. Any one of you? Let's discuss first of all the benefits of PPs. What are the benefits?
To protect yourself.
Yeah.
For example, helmet can be protect yourself. Like when you're taking the job, the helmet can protect or can reduce the hazard or the risk to the guy who the plant.
And imagine if that helmet is not approved. And imagine if that helmet is cracked or not being managed properly. Imagine this helmet is expired, or if it is not worn the way it should be, the internal harness is not, or the chin strap is not being used while working at height. So several limitations against each PP, And most importantly, the most neglected area, even I can highlight, we don't consider that PPs also have some expiry dates. We don't benchmark. What are the expiry dates of my helmets or gloves, or how many times we have to use, how long we have to use, and later on we need to bring new one actually. And then the behavior. Yes, there are plenty of benefits, but let's talk about the limitations. And in the limitation, I'll share one example practically. The safety department have issued earplug. You can see in the picture also, the small earplugs, not earmuff, the earplugs. And the noise level is above 95 decibel. It's a machine shop, plenty of machines are there. And a cumulative noise level is above than 95 decibel. And the company believes we have tried everything, all engineering controls, administrative controls. Now only one option remained is the PPs. So all employees have to wear earplugs. Now you'll be surprised how the earplugs I noted, and I took pictures also. I noted several employees, they are wearing earplug here, at the top, not inside. And sometimes inside, but at the vertical, not like putting horizontally inside. Just they are creating a show off that they are using earplugs. Then I interviewed some of the employees, and the replies were terrible. They mentioned these earplugs irritate them. They can't wear more than 10 minutes, or maybe less than that even. It's create irritation. It's not fit. It doesn't fit within our ears. And most importantly, when they became contaminated, it's even dangerous to their health. So they don't like to wear. It's a disposable, and company is not willing to issue again and again the earplug while this is disposable. Like one time we use, put off, and throw in the dustbin and getting the new one. But company is imposing you have to use this earplug maybe for one day, maybe for 1 week sometime, according to the cost of the earplug. And that is why we hate such kind of practice to wear earplug. And also we need to listen some weird sounds from the machine, and these earplugs or earmuffs are a big kind of obstacle. So we can't hear the weird sounds on the machine, and it is damaging our productivity or kind of quality requirements to our products. So several excuses. And that day I realized how much it is important to select the right set of PPs, appropriate, globally acceptable, easy to wear, easy to fulfill the requirements, and user friendly actually. And one terrible point, just highlighting in front of you, I can't disclose the name of the company. Like the decibel, legal limit is 85 decibel. Let's take an example of Saudi Arabia, the local regulations. Even globally as per OSHA, 85 decibel. Now, if the noise level is 95 decibel and the earplug what you provided can reduce only 5 decibel, the impact only 5 decibel, it can reduce. Still it's a violation. Still 5 decibel, that means the employees are bearing with 90 decibel, because that earplug only reduce 5 decibel impact. And that is how the employees are becoming deaf. That means hearing damage. And if they go to the court, file a case against the company that I became deaf because of these company operations, and you as a safety department or as a company legal department, you couldn't prove that you provided the right appropriate PPs or kind of earplug according to the noise level or according to the noise assessment. And if you lose the case, God forbid, compensation to that employee because he became deaf just because of your company operations and you didn't provide the right set of PPs. And I noted for earplugs, mostly no record. I noted personally, no record. Like you issued even earplug for how many times you are giving the old one, getting the new one and locking and recording somewhere, but no record. Only in the warehouse, the record is there. One box is issued to production area. But production area, which earplug is or how many earplugs used by each single employee, that record is missing. But in the code, even the smallest objective evidence or kind of evidence, legally it would be so helpful. That is why sometimes we have over documentation, especially to keep the objective evidence that we are complying safety requirements. Now this is employee's intention not to use earplug, and these are the pictures also we kept in our record. So somehow you need to win that case. Otherwise, a terrible compensation have to be paid by the company, and a huge loss. No doubt, then the owner will realize why the appropriate PPs have to be provided actually. So let's discuss. There are some merits and limitations.
Yes, excuse me, before you move on, this
Yes.
raised a question.
Yeah.
So regarding the frequency for the PPE, is it recommended by OSHA or NEBOSH or even the ISO? Is there any specific frequency for the type of PPEs used since the first use? Do we have anything like that, or is just left out to the company to decide?
No, there are actually for any PP, there are several relevant codes available, and that code, according to the specs, they have defined the shelf life of each PP. I repeat again, the shelf life of each PP, number one, and then how many times we can use them. And yes, it's also on the company's decision, like if PP, let's take an example of helmet. The shelf life is 6 months, that it should need to be used for 6 months. But because of scratches, because of the company operations, that helmet is almost demolished within 3 months, then you have to change. So according to the condition of PP, one way we have to surely replace. Otherwise, there are, I will try to share in the WhatsApp group some of the codes related to, helmets or gloves and everything. And within that code, of course, the manufacturer, especially the manufacturer, he will definitely mention, this earplug can be used once, or it can be used twice, or it is reusable. Even if it is reusable, for how many months, for how many days, it is well defined as per international standards by the manufacturer. So I will share, inshallah. It's a very good question. Thank you very much. So I'll share those codes in the WhatsApp group, inshallah. Okay. But of course, the company also have to inspect and train their employees to keep inspecting before every use, that what is the condition of the PP, and accordingly they are authorized to change if that PP is, like, imagine if you provided us safety shoes, but because of excessive use as per the need at the project, they became slippery while the design was anti-slippery. So number of usage or the way they use is very aggressive. So we are bound to change that safety shoes, to be very honest, instead of leaving with that case. Okay, he used aggressively and the shoes became slippery and let ready to
Yes,
facing many accident, you know.
yes, you are totally right. It goes also the other way, because and as we know, there are good companies. On the other hand, there are some greedy, I would say, companies. So they force the employees to use it more than the designated duration.
Absolutely.
So this will create another issue. So if my question, that's why I was asking if there
Excellent,
is
Masha.
any standpoint we can refer
I
to.
will share for each PP the relevant regulations, and that would be
Okay,
great help. And just get some energy to read them, to study them, and of course, you will be more expert on PPs, inshallah. Okay.
thank you very
No,
much. Thank you.
thank you very much for your wonderful, excellent question. Thank you very much. Now, there are merits and limitations, like can be used as interim control while more expensive or difficult controls are put in place. In some situations, it may be the only control option available. It may be needed as a backup for emergencies. When other controls have failed, it is usually cheap, it gives immediate protection. But there are plenty of limitations of PPs. It only protects one person, the wearer. It may not protect adequately if it is not fitted correctly. So, like you provided scabba, but face shield is not fit properly, or mustache or beard is there, and some gaps are there, and still toxic air contaminating the diluted air or the oxygen you have in the cylinder. So it may be also may not be comfortable and may interfere with the wearer ability to do the job. It may increase overall risk by impairing the senses, like goggles that missed up, especially now we have winter season, and because of fog, our these goggles uh, sometime they'll be missed up actually and hard to see. So there must be some systematic kind of safety regulations to be implemented when they clean, how to clean, and how are they going to make sure the visibility is not disturbed actually. It may not be compatible with other items that have to be worn or used. People do not like wearing PPs. And if it fails to danger, the worker is exposed to risk. So any failure to the PP, of course, is directly, we are putting our employee in danger. That is why some limitations are there. And that is the reason we have to rely on a complete hierarchy of control, starting from elimination, then substitution, engineering controls, administrative, and ultimately, at the last point, we can rely on the PPs as well. But bear in mind, there are several limitations. Now, use of guidance and legal standards, use of a risk matrix can help provide clarity, can set internal risk levels and requires action within the set time scale. Any action plan which is not time bound is not a good thing. If you have created a corrective action plan or kind of improvement plan, make it time bound and make sure who is responsible for which action. Could be one gentleman, could be several as a team. But make sure it is time bound and responsible person is well mentioned. And legal requirements override the findings of a risk assessment. Even if the risk is low, if the law requires it, then it must be done. Applies also the semi-legal codes of practice. Guidance can also assist. Now we have different levels of risk. Could be residual risk. We applied all the controls, complete hierarchy of control, but still residual risk is there, still remain risk is there. The risk level we are left with after controls have been implemented. Otherwise, we have acceptable risk. Risk has been reduced to an adequate level, and tolerable is not acceptable but can live with it. Like below 10 ppm of H2S, still we can work for 8 hours, but of course, by tolerable is risk. One way, we have no other choice, but sometimes we have ways to make LEL 0%, including H2S to be eliminated from the space. So unacceptable risk is too high. This is the danger zone area. Any risk which is unacceptable, and if we ignore as a safety leader, trust me, we are the biggest culprit. Like if we know, we are knowledgeable, we understood this risk is unacceptable. We evaluated already, and the number we got 20 or 25, and still we closed our eyes because the general manager of the company or the project manager or the operation manager, they told us, close your eyes, Mr. Safety Manager or Safety Leader. We have to finish the project as quick as possible. Otherwise, penalty clauses are there signed with the customer. And for saving that money, we are ready to kill our employees. This is all happening. That is why I mentioned, the new religion invented, gain money and power by any means. So unacceptable risk is too high. We surely have to put controls and precautions. Now, step 4 is record significant findings and implementing. What is the typical content? The activity, the area you assessed, and the hazards. You have to make sure the groups at risk and adequacy of existing control measures. Either if any risk is coming in red zone, that means existing controls are not sufficient. If any risk is coming under tolerable or under residual or under tolerable risk level, that means the existing controls are still quite comprehensive and sufficient. Only thing is we need to maintain them, sustain them. Further precautions needed if existing controls are not good enough. Date and name of the competent person, who will do what and when. We have to decide and review date. These are the typical content of step 4, record significant findings and implementing. And yes, we have to review the significant changes whenever there is a process change, the substances came in, equipment, workplace, environment, or even personnel. We truly need to review the significant changes. If it is no longer valid, because of accident, near miss, ill health, change to legal standards, or periodically, we have, so 3 levels. Whenever there is significant change, we have to review. If it is no longer valid because of accident, near miss, ill health, or change the legal standards, that means if for any activity, any accident happened, it's a failure of your risk controls. It's a failure of your controls against that risk. That is why that accident happened. So what is the best strategy? Review your risk assessment also and see what additional controls you can try to reduce the probability or possibility of that accident, or maybe avoidance reoccurrence. Otherwise, periodically, still we have to review. Now, in special cases and vulnerable workers, who is vulnerable workers or special cases? The young persons, maybe under 18, lack of experience, don't consider they are the highly expert like you. Physical and mental maturity level is entirely different. Poor risk perception, they can't evaluate or perceive the risk the way you can, mashallah, as per your experience. Influenced by peer group, eager control measures prohibit certain high risk activities. So young persons, what is the control measure? Make sure you are not allowing them to do high risk activities or high risk machinery they are not going to operate. And also you need to restrict their work patterns and the hours, and make sure no overtime being applied through the young persons. Now, new and expectant mothers, certain chemicals led, you need to avoid certain biological agents, even manual handling, temperature extremes, whole body vibration, ionizing radiation, night shift stress and violence that should be avoided from the expectant mothers or the new employees. Disabled workers, we need to identify them. Health and fitness criteria for some jobs, maybe the eyesight requirements to drive forklift trucks. Workers with non-disabilities, what are the implications of their disability? We need to understand. Lone workers, workers especially vulnerable and more at risk of violence, could be prison officer, mental health nurse. And if they are injured or ill, especially like confined space entry, so make sure accordingly we have a system in place to deal with lone workers as well. So that was 3.5 overall the risk